This is the briefing video for the meeting on January 9th, 2023, first meeting of 2023. And we start out normally, but then it gets a little bit different kind of quick. So call to order, invocation and pledge of allegiance, roll call, approval of agenda, approval of past meeting minutes, treasurer's report, paying bills, fire department report, and then it's the first of the year, first meeting of the year. So we'll have our annual fire department report at that time. Ellen has prepared that. That'll be getting posted on the website if anyone wants to see it as well. You'll have physical copies for the trustees at the meeting. Next, we have our Planning Commission report, then our Zoning Board of Appeals meeting report, because there were one of those meetings that took place, our Maintenance and Grounds report, and then our annual Planning and Zoning report. And so similar type of thing, I have that in the reference packet because Steve had it ready and worked out to just include it there, but he also made copies to give to the trustees at the time. Then we have our first public comment. Then we have a couple of unique things. The meetings always end up being unique for us, right? And there'll be boring parts, then there should be some exciting parts in here as well. The first one is the Spark Grant. And so that's a proposal by Fleece and Vanderbrink, and a person is going to come from Fleece and Vanderbrink to present and ask questions on this. And that is, well, an attempt to get the Spark Grant. So it would cost $15,000 for the proposal, the way it's written up. I have just the form for the proposal time schedule and numbers in the board packet itself. In the reference packet, I have the full proposal for all the details if anyone wants to see that. Next, we have three things on the water policy, three separate things. So the first is Resolution 2023-01 for the water rates. And now I was distracted by the emphasis we had over the ordinances, which I knew was going to be controversial. And so I forgot to include that as a separate vote before. And so we'll have a vote on that. So that's just the raising of the rates, which is the same schedule that we've seen going back. We passed it in 2021, the last raise, and this is on that same schedule for increases. Next, we have Ordinance 2023-02 for water corrections. And this is myself and then the supervisor for Laketon and pointed out a few things that were just incorrect in the way that part of the ordinance was written. For instance, you couldn't accept money from another source than a private source, so like a grant wouldn't be applicable, which is obviously an error in the writing of it, and switching from quarterly to monthly billing, which I believe is how it's done now anyways. And so some small changes like that. And so that's written up separately. And then Ordinance 2023-03 for water connections. And now this is the big controversial one. Farah, who is now the deputy administrator for the county, is just recently the outgoing head of the Department of Public Works, is going to come present on that. This is the reason that vote before last month had split 3-3, which means it doesn't go through. And I brought that back to the Water Policy Board. My take on it was that we should just let it sit, and Dalton's would just be slightly different. But that is not what the Water Policy Board wanted. They wanted me to bring it back to the board. So I'm bringing it back to the board. But I had the lawyer for Dalton connect directly with the lawyer from the Water Policy Board and talk about the contract and what specifically happens if we're not on the same page. I've been on that board for 2 years since I got in office, and I've been emphasizing the whole time with that board passing stuff and the local municipalities having to pass the same thing, and if there's a disagreement, there being no way to resolve it except for a lawsuit is a bad setup, and something should change in that. And here we are 2 years later, nothing's changed in it, and we're in a similar situation. But our legal counsel, the legal opinion from the lawyer for the township, which I've included that written in here as a letter just on what it shows there, is that according to the contract, there can't be a difference over rates because then that money would have to come out of our general fund for the township. But there could be a difference in some of these other ordinances between the municipalities. So we're really into interesting, unique, and maybe deep water on that. So we'll see how that goes. That should be one of the interesting, non-boring things. Next, we have the quarterly budget adjustments. Quite a few in here. And I wrote that up like I did the last time, where it has a short little explanation on why something needs to be moved, why I'm thinking the numbers that I'm thinking. And so there are a bunch of bunch of numbers going up, a bunch of numbers going down with those explanations so you can see them. Overall, it just comes out that we're slightly better on the budget with these adjustments. I think it's $5,700 right in there that I wrote up to the positive. One of the biggest changes you see on big numbers moving is the money from T&A, which is a temporary kind of holding account. And before, at the beginning of the year, a lot of stuff has changed since then, even our clerk working with the GL numbers and everything. And we had put in what I was kind of estimating as far as income from property sales that we'd put into sewer. And so that was $425,000. And now there's a separate line item created for those property sales going to sewer as this special thing up to that $500,000, which we have generated. Part of it, $213,000, is transferred. The rest still needs to be transferred. So that's why some of the numbers, that's why those numbers look big. Other big numbers were that we didn't hire as many seasonal people for maintenance as I was thinking that maybe to try to catch up with everything from over the years we would do. So that's a big number in coming down. And few other changes in there. They're explained. I'm trying to make it so that type of budget document is largely just self-explanatory. That's why I'm putting in the reasoning for each adjustment. Next, we have board review member, and I have the information, a short little bio that Lori Hayes had sent me. She's previous clerk, and she talked to me about being interested in that position and somewhat familiar with it, obviously, and so that could certainly work out. We had a resignation on that board for health reasons. The next is board review alternate. On the board review, you can have alternates. And the people we have on there have been on there a long time, and I don't think they would necessarily mind stepping away. I think they would prefer that, but they wouldn't want to leave the township in a bad place as far as that's concerned, because we need some citizens on those types of boards. They're important. And so if anyone wants to turn in applications, turn them in. I try to keep some, just in case an opening comes up, I can look through them and consider and reach out to people about that. And so, but this was Mark Grant, put in his info. He's a short bio in here too about being the alternate. I think it would be good to get someone familiar with it, get them through some of the training that's required and that type of thing, and then potentially have that extra person for that board. And it's only a 3-person board, so if 2 people end up sick, you can't even vote on something. So it's good to have that alternate in place as well. Next, we have the land sale proposal on Russell Road, and then the land bid opening for East Daniels Road. And so obviously these have already started. They're on steps 2 and 3 of that process. So moving forward with those. Next, we have ordinance 2023-01 for ORVs. And this is, I had an email inquiry about the liability for the township because we register the ORVs, and the liability is covered by a waiver in that registration. But since we don't inspect the vehicles, it doesn't serve a necessarily particular purpose to do the ORVs in Dalton Township. You still have to get the state sticker. And so in Lori's opinion, it was actually we're covered better by liability by not doing the registrations, which is essentially pointless work here at the township too. So I think it makes a lot of sense to go in that direction. And when it had first gone through, it's clunky. It's a political process. And so I was thinking that maybe in a couple of years come back around to it and look at if we need to register them, because it did kind of seem like pointless work. And this person emailing me essentially just brought it up earlier, but I think it would be good to look at getting sorted out before we go into this next season. Next, we have Andrea leave, is what I wrote, and so one of the employees here, the deputy treasurer, she is having a surgery. She wrote a little letter on it, and because it could be over 30 days, if it's over 30 days, it needs to be approved by the board. And so wrote that up in there, and that's a board vote, unique one-off situation type of thing. Next, we have the camping ordinance to Planning Commission, and this is just to start the Planning Commission, their process for reviewing having a camping ordinance in place. It's a relatively divisive subject with strong opinions on both sides of there should be a really lenient one or there shouldn't be one at all over the place, but I think it would be good, and I hope the conversation can be had, the discussion can be had around that, and some common ground can be found. Next, we have enforcement ordinance to Planning Commission. And the resolutions for enforcement have been going decently well. I think we've worked out the kinks in that. And so we'll look at, for zoning enforcement, that has to go through to the Planning Commission, go through their process for review, hearing and everything, and come back to the board. For the board itself, well, we'll get to that in a little bit. But that's similar to the camping ordinance, starting the process at the very beginning of the process. Next, we have Resolution 2023-02, which is the first resolution for the Central Road paving. I have those numbers in here. People on Central Road, if you don't want it, now come protest, write a written objection. Now would be a great time to stop it. If you don't want to stop it, then let it continue. But try not to decide at the last minute that you want to stop something that has gone through a lengthy and expensive process. So we ended up with a little bit of that on Michelinda before, but we have a large number of signatures on the petition for this project. Finally got the numbers from the road commission and are working through it, right? So there's this first resolution which establishes a few things, but it basically sets up in the next meeting a hearing. And so I'll plan on doing resolutions 2 and 3, which means there'll be a hearing in February, and then in the next month there'll be another hearing in March. This is what I'm planning on. On March will be the last hearing. If it passes then it starts. And that gives enough time to the road commission to get that project in this year. That is my thinking on that. And so we'll see how it goes, but right now it looks like the process is moving forward. Next, we have real estate escalation clause policy, and this is because I don't know what I'm opening when I get a sealed letter, which we have one, right, for the land bid thing. So I have a sealed envelope. I don't know what's in it. I don't know what the proposal is, and so if I open it, someone could have an escalation clause. Someone can have anything they want in there, but they can have an escalation clause. So we should have something in place of how we're going to treat that. And before, when we talked about it, deciding that the escalation clause really leads into a type of auction process, and not wanting that, we'll just say we're not going with escalation clauses. But since I still don't know what I'm opening, have something in place of how we're going to treat them if someone writes one in, which is to just go with the highest number that they list as their official bid, because it would appear that they wanted to bid up to that amount. So we'll just go with that number as their bid. And I wrote that in there. It's redlined. It's in the packet, which is posted online, of course, and we're on Municode now. The ordinances, both sets of ordinances are on there, along with these other types of documentation. Next, we have the payroll procedure policy. This is a contradiction in the handbook. The handbook's not great, right? There's a number of contradictions, a number of things that don't work necessarily great in there. This is one of them. It says both that there's going to be bi-weekly payment, meaning every other week, I assume not twice a week, right? So bi-weekly payment every other week. And then it says that the payments are going to be on the 15th and 30th of the month, which would be bi-monthly. So there's an inherent contradiction in the handbook itself. Right now, the township's been paying twice a month for employees and that type of thing, but it means your pay periods can be different. There's not an even number of weeks in the month, obviously. And I talked it over with Tracy. She thinks it would work better to go to essentially an every other Friday payment, which it would be a normal practice, and I think that could work out decent. And so I just eliminated the part about the 15th and 30th and left the part that's bi-weekly. Since there was an inner contradiction, you have to go with one, so it's a relatively small change to change that process for us. Next, discussion items. One is enforcement ordinance for code of ordinances. So this is for the general code of ordinances. We should have the enforcement process in there along with zoning. But this just has to come before the board. It doesn't have to go through the planning commission process. And so I have that in here to review if we want to change or adjust anything moving forward. And then next we have the annual meeting date. And this is because we have the budget coming up. And we have an annual meeting of the electors, right? But that is actually for just the pay, the salary of the elected officials, which I think is good to keep in place, right? Because the last 2 years, I've proposed that the elected officials don't get raises. I was overridden in the first year. I got some people had said that was a bad decision in the second year, even though it didn't go through. Now, in the last 2 years, I'm thinking about proposing raises for at least these three main positions, because we want people to be able to come into them and afford to be in them. to run for the position, right? You have to hopefully have some idea of service, not just the pay coming in here, not necessarily a great plan. But nevertheless, I think it's good that if I propose a raise to elected officials, people can show up to the meeting if they don't want it, and they can vote it down. So I like the annual meeting of the electors for that. And we also should have a meeting to go over the budget stuff. Now, I'm working on the budget, looking at it. Obviously, we have the quarterly budget adjustments in here, right? That helps with looking over the budget for the next year, doing things like that. But I think it would be good to have a meeting where we go over everything, and I'll have the explanations for each line item too. So it's relatively self-explanatory, but then anyone that has questions from the public can come, and anyone from the board can debate how much if something should go up, something should go down. And I'm really, at this point, I'm thinking, because I have discussion items at the end of the meetings like this, I really could prepare that and have that in the February meeting, right? Because in the February meeting, we'll have the resolution to establish the annual meeting of the electors' date and the resolutions for the salaries of the elected officials. So, but we'll see how that goes. And that normally is held on a Saturday, and I think that makes a lot of sense in March sometime to continue that. That way people, if they, especially if there's, if I propose doubling the elected officials' salaries, then hopefully a bunch of people would show up and vote that down, because that would be bad. That would be improper. That's why that type of thing is in place. And having it on a Saturday allows people to show up like that. It won't propose such a ridiculous raise, obviously. But I think it's good to allow people that time, which I know there's some people that work on the middle of a Saturday, but I think it's a lot less than work Monday through Friday, so it makes it easier for some people, and that's why it's been done here in the past. So I think that is decent to continue. And then we're to our final board comment and public comment. And in the reference packet, I've included a few things. The first thing is the annual planning and zoning report. That'll also be posted on the website separately. Has to be legally. And then the Spark Grant application proposal, the full one from Fleece and Vanderbrink, is included in here. I've also included water quality reports from PLM, Professional Lakes Management, on the lakes. So Twin Lake, Middle Lake, North Lake, West Lake. They all have water quality reports in here. Also, I've included the Russell Road real estate comparables from the Realtor, if someone wants to look at all the comparables in there. I've also included Discourse on Voluntary Servitude by Estine de la Botie, which is a short paper from the 1500s by a French judge about why people like to stay, as a society, have this tendency to stay in these roles of servitude, or seem to want the society to be like that. I think it's great to think about in our current society, the way everything currently is, in the direction that we're headed. And next, I have On the Phenomenon of Sudden Death in Animals and Man by Kurt Richter, which is a very interesting study about how rats in certain circumstances, when they appear to not have hope of being able to get out of something they're swimming in, they won't even try very long, which is immensely insightful, because what it means is that hope is necessary for life. And, this is it. A lot of people feel hopeless in different circumstances, and I think our overall societal situation is leading a lot of people in the hopeless direction. I know certainly the difficulties and the frustrations, right, in a political role, in the role that I'm trying to fulfill, is extremely frustrating and could easily be seen as hopeless, and certainly and sometimes is felt as hopeless by me, for sure. And it's important to understand that if you increase your endurance and your stamina levels, essentially, right, getting back to the rats, that you can go an immense amount longer, right? You have a lot more left in you, and how important that hope is necessary for life itself. And so super important to include, super important to know and understand. So if anyone has questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns about the meeting coming up on Monday or anything else, feel free to reach out. My direct line at the office is area code 231-332-6700. Call anytime, leave a message, I'll get back to you, and I try to get back pretty quickly, usually in the same day. Every now and then I don't come here on a weekend anymore, which is decently nice. Something I've been aiming towards since I got the role. I was hoping I could limit the type of every weekend thing to first 6 months. Grew to a year, basically grew to 18 months. We're 2 years in now, and I still do a decent amount, but basically if it's during the week, I'll get back to you the same day or the next day, and then sometimes they still come in on the weekends. I know a lot of people have been surprised to get their phone calls returned late in the evening or on a Saturday or a Sunday, and so nevertheless, I'll get back to you pretty quick on that, or email, and just as often. I get through all my emails. I know some people, they'll leave emails for a week that they're trying to get to. I think that's relatively ridiculous, especially in a business setting like this, township government type of thing. So I respond to those fast too. And that is supervisor@daltontownship.org. So this is Jeff Martin. That is the brief for the meeting coming up on Monday, January 9th. If anyone has anything, you have my contact information, and I'll see you next time.